Okay, let's do today's stream. Now it's raining outside, so I can't take my two girls go out for a walk. That side because we didn't go out these days because my little girl Bessie she doesn't feel good. We went to White last yesterday before. The White gave her two injection, and I waited outside because the coronavirus. So she went into the White with the White into the house with the White and got injection. I don't know how did she feel, or scared or just okay. I don't know. Um, Yesterday, I I thought she got fever. Yes, she got fever, and I'm so nervous about her. I already gave her the pill the vet gave me. So last night, she just feels so tired. The whole day she felt so tired. And the last night we went on bed earlier to accompany her. So I touched her feet, um, her paws, and feel the temperature a little bit high, a little bit higher. And this morning I touched, I oh, before I fall asleep, I touch it. It's good. I think the temperature already dropped down. And this morning I touch it. Uh, I think it's all okay. But she's still tired. Every day when I got up and when I get up and go downstairs, uh, but today she doesn't. She just keep herself upstairs. So I know she's still tired, but I think she's getting better. Today I will cook some uh, meat, and she doesn't like tofu. I think I gave her some tofu. Yesterday I cook eggs and tofu for her, but she doesn't want the tofu, so I only gave her eggs. Today I will cook some lamb meat for her. Hope a little bit. I know it's so difficult for her. She never been through this, and I asked the White how what can I do to prevent they got this disease, but the White just say, oh, it just happened. When it happened, you take them to the yes, then there's nothing I can do to prevent this kind of disease. I hope she will get better soon now. Today, I hope. Um, she sleep a lot. That's good. So she can have a rest. Yeah. Okay. Let's begin today's reading. I I hope she will be okay today. Yeah. Let's read. It's occurred It's occurred neither to Harvard nor to Wade that the conversation which happening were being turned over afterward in Philip's active brain. It had never struck him before that religion was a matter upon which decision was possible. him, it meant the Church of England, and not to be believed in its. Let's chat. I think let's have some water. It occurred neither to Herbert nor to Weeks. It occurred neither to Herbert nor to Weeks that the conversation which helped them to pass an idle evening were being turned over afterward. It occurred. Let's see, is it occurred? Sometimes I just want to make sure how to pronounce it. Yeah, it's occur. It occurred neither to have, let's see. It's occurred neither to have Herbert nor to Weeks. Occurred neither to Herbert nor to Weeks that the conversation which helped them to pass an idle 无聊的、无意义的空闲 idle evening were being turned over afterward. I'll see. Yeah, yes, it is idle. It is idle. It is. Yes. Pass an idle evening. Pass an idle evening were being turned over afterward. Being turned over afterward in Philip's active brain. It had never struck him before that religion was a matter upon which discussion was possible. Of course, we can discuss everything. To him, it meant the Church of England, and not to believe in its tenets was a sign. Tenet 原则 tenet. Let's see tenet 教义 Let's see tenet 原则 I think here is 教义 To him it meant the Church of England, and not to believe in its tenet was a sign of willfulness. Willful 自愿的故意的 willfulness 任性倔强 a sign of not to believe in its
willfulness.
Not to believe in to him it meant the Church of England, and not to believe in its tenet was a sign of willfulness 任性倔强 Okay, this is mean if you don't believe in it, so you are willfulness. You are willful 任性倔强was a sign of willfulness which could not fail of punishment here or hereafter. Hereafter 从此以后死后 Here or hereafter. To him it meant the Church of England. Not believing its tenet was a sign of willfulness which could not fail of punishment. Could not fail punishment. Could not fail of punishment here or thereafter. There was some doubt in his mind about the cherished chastisement of unbelievers. Chastisement. Chastisement. Chastisement.
Chastisement. Chastisement. Chastisement.
Chastisement.
Chastisement.
Chastisement.
Chastisement.
Chastisement. Chastisement.
Chastisement.
Chastisement. I have to follow the 严惩. There was some doubt in his mind about the chastisement of unbeliever. It was possible that a merciful judge reversed the flame of hell for the heathen Madam Buddhish and the rest. That's so funny. And the rest would spare dissenter and Roma would spare dissenter, yes, would spare dissenter and Roman Catholic, though at the cost of how much humanity when they were made to realize their error. It was also possible that he would be pitiful to those who had had no chance of learning the truth, reasonable enough, though such were the activities of the missionary society. There could not be many in this condition, but this was reasonable enough, though such were the activities of the missionary society here could not be many in this condition, but if the chance had been theirs and they had neglected it, in which category were obvious Roman Catholic and this punishment was sure and merited. 大的功德 The punishment merited 应得的 was sure and merited. Miscreant was in a palace state. Let's see, miscreant. It was clear that the miscreant
Miscreant.
It's clear.
Miscreant.
歹徒恶棍 It was clear miscreant was in a powerless state. Powerless 危险的 powerless state.
Parlors.
Perilous state 危险的境地。So you can be a miscreant. Perhaps Philip had not been taught in so many words, but certainly the impression had been given him that only members of the Church of England had any real hope of eternal happiness. One of the things that Philip had heard definitely stated was one of the things you see, the God they can give some people mercy. And do you think he's right? But of course, if you believe in God, you think whatever he decide is right. But one of the things that Philip had heard definitely stated was that the unbeliever was a wicked and vicious man. Wicked, OK, vicious 是什么样的 ？Wicked 是邪恶的 ，vicious 呢也是邪恶的。看 wicked 都是邪恶的，反正都是不好的。Wicked and vicious。Wicked and vicious man. But weak though he believed in hardly anything that Philip believed in hardly anything that Philip believed, led a life of Christian purity. Philip had received little kindness in his life, and he was touched by the Americans' desire to help him. Once, when a cold kept him in bed for 3 days, Weeks nursed him like was neither vice nor weakness in him, but only sincerity and love kindness. It was evidently virtuous and unbelieving. Virtuous. You see, not only those people who believe in God, believe in Christ, believe in God can be good. You know, everyone can be. For me, let's think this word, virtuous,
Virtuous.
virtuous. To be virtuous. No. 道德的，有道德的。It was evidently possible to be virtuous and unbelieving. Of course. They taught people, if you are not a Christian, you are not virtuous. That's lie, totally lie. Also, Philip had been given to understand that people adhered to other faiths only from obstinacy or self-interest. Obstinacy. We already learned it. Obstinacy. 顽固。Obstinacy. 顽固。
obstinacy,
obstinacy 顽固 or self-interest. In their heart, they knew they were false. They deliberately sought to deceive others. You see, they say, this is the why I can't believe in those religion. If you don't believe it, you are fault. And in their heart, they knew they were false. No, I'm not false at all. But people say, oh, you don't believe it because you didn't get the call, because you are not good enough to get the call from the God. They deliberately sought to deceive others. Also, Philip being given to understand that people adhered to others' faith only from obstinacy,
obstinacy,
obstinacy. I need to obstinacy or self-interest. In their heart, they knew they were false. They deliberately sought to deceive others. Now, for the sake of his German, he had been accustomed on Sunday morning to attend the Lutheran service. But when Hayward arrived, he began instead to go with him to Mass. That wherever he noticed that whereas the church was nearly empty and the congregation had a listless air, the Jesuit, on the other hand, was crowded, and the worship seemed to pray with all their hearts. They had not the look of hypocrites. Hypocrites. He was surprised at the contrast, for he knew of course that the Lutherans, whose faith was closer to that of the Church of England, on that account were nearer the truth than the Roman Catholics. Most of the men, it was largely a masculine congregation, or South German, and he could not help saying to himself that if he had been born in South Germany, he would certainly have been a Roman Catholic. He might just as well have been born in a Roman Catholic country as in England, and in England as well in a Wesleyan or family, as in one that fortunately belonged to the church by law established. Yes, that's what you should think. Now, for the sake of his German, had been accustomed on Sunday morning to attend the Lutheran service. But when Hayward arrived, he began instead to go with him to Mass. He noticed that whereas the Whereas, let's make it sure. Whereas, 见语反而然而 whereas he noticed whereas the Protestant church was nearly empty and the congregation the congregation 会众，教堂里的会众 ，OK， 教堂里的 had a listless air， listless 倦怠的无精打采的 listless 倦怠的 listless air 倦怠的 had a listless air. The Jesus, on the other hand, was crowded, and the worshipper seemed to pray with all their heart. They had not the look of hypocrite. Okay. Yeah.
hypocrite,
Hypocrite 伪君子 Hypocrites. They hadn't the look of hypocrite. 伪善的 No. 伪 Let's see. 伪善 UD 伪善的伪善者 They hadn't the look of hypocrites. He was surprised at the contrast, for he knew of course that the Lutherans, those faiths were closer to that of the Church of England. On that account, were nearer the truth than the Roman Catholic. Most of the men, it was largely we already learned it.
masculine,
masculine 男子气概的阳性的 男子气概 Oh, I'm so hungry. Masculine congregation was South German. Most of the men, it was largely masculine. Let's see. Masculine. It was largely a masculine congregation, or South Germans, and he could not help saying to himself that if he had been born in South Germany, he would certainly have been a Roman Catholic. He might just as well have been born in Roman Catholic country as in England, and in a Wesleyan family, Methodist family, as in one that fortunately belonged to the church by law established. He was a little breathless at the danger he had run. He was a little breathless at danger he had run. Philip was no friendly terms with the little Chinaman who sat at the table with him twice each day. Philip was no friendly terms with the little Chinaman who sat at table with him twice each day. His name was Song. He was always smiling, um, affable, and polite. Affable, 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 not affable,
Affable.
affable. We already know it. Affable, 和善的 always smiling, affable, and polite. It seemed strange that she should freely because he was a Chinaman. It seemed strange that he should frizzle. Why? Because they scared you. Frizzle.
Frizzle.
炸的吱吱响。
Frizzle. Frizzle.
That's so funny. She should frizzle. That's so funny. 炸的吱吱响啊，来看，吱吱响。That he should frizzle in hell merely because he was a Chinaman. But if salvation was possible, whatever a man's faith was, there didn't seem to be any particular advantage in belonging to Church of England. But if salvation 拯救 yeah. But if salvation was possible, whatever a man's faith was, there didn't seem to be any particular advantage in belonging. Yes, because they say 拯救救世主，拯救救世主，拯救，还有呢，救世主。But if salvation was possible, whatever a man's faith was, didn't seem to be any particular advantage in belonging to the Church of England. Philip, more puzzled than he had ever been in his life, sounded weak. He had to be careful, for he was very sensitive to ridicule and the acidulous humor with which the American treated the Church of England. This disconcerted him. Weeks only puzzled him more. Sounded weeks. sound. Nice sound. Let's see. 发出声音。Let's see. 试探。More puzzled than they had been. The sounded weeks. 试探。发音 sounded weeks. I don't know, but just you know, he had to be careful, for he was very sensitive to ridiculous and the acidulous humor. Acidulous 尖酸的。
Acidulous.
That's what I think, because acid is 酸. Acidulous humor. The acidulous humor with which the American treated the Church of England disconcerted him. Humor with which the American treated the Church of England disconcerted him. 使谁不安？ disconcerted him. Weeks only puzzled him more. He made Philip acknowledge that those South Germans whom he saw in the Jesus church. Jesus. Is it Jesus? Okay, sorry. Jesus. Oh, 这是 no, not Jesus. Jesuit. Jesuit. 耶稣会 Jesuit. No, this is so funny. Jesuit is 耶稣会教士，同时也是虚伪的、狡诈的人。So, you know, the racist from all those kind of words. That's so funny. Let's give the translation here. 天主教 no, I can't make it. That those South Germans who he saw in Jesuit in the Jesuit church were avid and firmly convinced of the truth of Roman Catholicism, as he was of that of the Church of England, and from that he led him to admit that the Mohammedan and the Buddhist were convinced also of the truth of their respective religions. Yes, it looked as though knowing that you were right meant nothing. It looks as though knowing that you were right meant nothing. They all knew they were right. So interesting. Now you know waking up. That's great. Weeks had no intention of undermining the boy's faith. Yeah. Weeks had no intention of undermining the boy's faith, but he was deeply interested in religion and found it an absorbing topic of conversation. He had described his own views accurately when he said that he was earnestly disbelieved in almost everything that other people believed. Once Philip asked him a question which he had heard his uncle put when the conversation had Once Philip asked him a question which he had heard his uncle put when the conversation at the vicarage had fallen upon some madly rationalistic work, which were then exciting discussion in the newspaper. Once Philip asked him a question which he had heard his uncle put when the conversation at the vicarage had fallen upon some mentally ration, rationalistic 神智的
rationalistic, rationalistic,
rationalistic 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 work, which was then exciting discussion in the newspaper. But why should you be right? And all those fellow but all these fellow like some say be wrong. You mean that they were very clever and learned? But why should you be right and all those fellow be wrong? You mean that they were very clever and learned men, while you have grave doubt whether I am either? Asked Weeks. Yes, answered Philip uncertainly, for put in that way his question seemed im- impertinent, seemed impertinent. I think 鲁莽的、无理的、莽撞的。Yes, for put in that way, his question seemed impertinent. Impertinent, I remember it. Saint believed that the earth was flat and that the sun turned round it. I don't know what that proves. Why? It proves that you believe with your generation. Your saint lived in an age of faith when it was particularly impossible to disbelieve what to us is positively incredible. Okay, so yes, believe that the earth was flat and the sun turned round it. I don't know what that proves. Why? It proves that you believe with your generation. Your saints live in an age of faith when it was particularly impossible to disbelieve what to us is positively incredible. Then how do you know what we have the truth now? I don't. Philip thought this over for a moment, then he sighed. I don't see why the things we believe absolutely now shouldn't be just as wrong as they believed in the past. I don't see whether the things we believe absolutely no shouldn't be just as wrong as they believe in the past. Neither do I. Then how can you believe anything at all? I don't know. Philip asked Weeks what he thought of Heward religion. Men have always formed gods in their own image. He believes in the picturesque. Picturesque. I believe in picturesque too. Picturesque. Let's see the picturesque. Yes, picturesque. Picturesque, yes. Men have always formed gods, said the Weeks. He believed in the picturesque. Philip paused for a little while, then he sighed. I don't see why one should believe in God at all. Oh my God! I don't see why one should believe in God at all. The word was no sooner out of his mouth than he realized that he had ceased to do so. The words, the, the words were no sooner out of his mouth than he realized he had ceased to do so. It took his breath away like a plunge into cold water. He looked at Weeks with startled eyes. Suddenly, he felt afraid. Suddenly, he felt afraid. He left Weeks as quickly as he could. He wanted to be alone. Oh my God, poor boy. It was the most startling experience that he had ever had. He tried to think it all out. It was very exciting, since his whole life seemed concerned. He thought his decision on this matter must profoundly affect its course, and a mistake might lead to internal damnation. But the more he reflected, the more convinced he was. And though during the next few weeks he read books as to skepticism,怀疑 aid to skepticism.
Skepticism.
Skepticism. Skepticism. 你看，怀疑宗教就叫怀疑主义了。这怀疑论，怀疑宗教，怀疑哦 no 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 no， 怀疑宗教，怀疑宗教。Skepticism, aid to skepticism, with eager interest. It was only to confirm him in what he felt instinctively. The fact was that he had ceased to believe, not for the reason nor the other, but because he had not the religious temperament. 冲动、气质 temperament 性格
temperament,
temperament
temperament,
暴躁 temperament 好 okay but because he had not the religious temperament been forced upon him from the outside, it was a matter of environment and example. A new environment and a new example gave him the opportunity to find himself. He put off the faith of his childhood quite simply. He put off the faith of his childhood quite simply, like a cloak, like he no longer needed. At first, life seemed strange and lonely without the belief which, though he never realized it, had been a unfailing support. Unfailing support. He felt like a man has leaned on a stake and found himself forced suddenly to walk without a seat. It really seemed as though the days were colder and the night more solitary. But he was unhealed for the excitement. You see, at first, life seemed strange and lonely without belief which he had been an unfailing support. He felt like a man who has leaned on a himself forced suddenly to walk without assistance. That is what no. That is what the religion is. Yes, someone leaned on a stick and found himself forced suddenly to walk without assistance. You can walk without assistance, really. It really seemed as though the days were colder and the nights more solitary, but he was upheld by the excitement. It seemed to make life a more thrilling adventure, and in a little while the stick which he had thrown aside, the cloak which had fallen from his shoulder, seemed an intolerable burden of which he had been eased. The religion exercises which for so many years had been forced upon him were part and parcel of religion and were part and parcel of religion to him. He thought of the clocks and epistle which he had been made to learn by heart, and the long service at the cathedral through which he had sighed when whenever limb itched with the desire for movement, and he remembered those walks at night through muddy road to the parish church at Blackstable, and the coldness of that bleak building. Bleak. Right. Oh, I'm so happy and bleak. Bleak building. He sat with his feet like ice, his fingers numb and heavy, and all around was the sickly odor of older. Oh, older.
Odor.
Control C。Control A。好像是那个，Palma 润发油。Yes。Palmatoon 润发油。The odor of 润发油。Oh, he had been so bored. His heart leaped when he saw he was free from all that. 我可能在头上没动。He was surprised at himself because he ceased to believe so easily, and not knowing that he felt as he did on account of the subtle working of his inmost nature. He ascribed the certainty he had reached to his own cleverness. He was unduly pleased with himself. I am so happy for you, Philip. He was surprised at himself because he ceased to believe so easily, and not knowing that he felt as he did on account of the subtle working of his inmost nature. Subtle. Let's see what subtle is. Subtle, 微妙的。Subtle working, subtle. No 不发音的 subtle, 微妙的。We already learned it.
Subtle.
Subtle, 微妙的。Not knowing that he felt as he did on account of the subtle working of his inmost nature, he ascribed the certainty he had reached. He ascribed
Ascribe. Ascribe.
He felt as he did on account of the subtle working of his inmost nature. Inmost, 最深处的 inmost nature. He ascribed the certainty he had reached to his own cleverness. Not because, yes, it's just, he was unduly pleased. Unduly. He was unduly pleased with himself. I am happy with you. Unduly. 过分的，过度的。 He was unduly pleased with himself, with youth lack of sympathy of an attitude other, with youth lack of sympathy for an attitude other than its own. He despised not a little Weeks and Hayward because they were content with the vigor emotion, which they called God, and the step, which to himself so obvious. Oh my God. So you see, believe or not believe the God, it's all right. So don't feel you believe it, you are higher than others, or you don't believe it, you are higher than others. That's not fair. With youth lack of sympathy for an attitude other than its own, he desperate, he desperate. He desperate not a little weeks and oh, great, with youth lack of sympathy for an attitude other than its own, He desperate now. He desperate not a little weak and Hayward because they were content with the vigor emotion, which they called God, and would not take the further step which to himself seemed to be obvious. Is it? I understand it the wrong way. Let's check the Chinese version.菲利普对自己感到诧异，竟如此轻易停止了信仰。他不明白之所以会有这样的误会。他高兴的忘乎所以，因为年轻，对任何不同于自己的处事态度缺乏同情。也，So with youth lack of sympathy for an attitude other than its own, he 但是 despite 是蔑视 ，despise 看不起。He despised not a little weak and because they were content. Yes. So, but he desperate， 他因为他们是满于那种他们成为上帝的模糊的感情，不愿意跨出在菲利普看得明显的。Okay. But not a little 啊。He despised. He despise.
Despise.
He despise.
Despise.
Okay. 那是很瞧不起的意思。He despised not a little weeks. He despised not a little weeks and Hayward because they were content with the vigor emotion, which they called God, and would not take the further step which to himself seemed to be obvious. One day he went along up a certain hill so that he might see a view which he knew not why filled him always with wild exhilaration. It was autumn now, but often the days were cloudless still, and then the The sky seemed to be aglow with a more splendid light. It was as though nature consciously sought to put a further vehemence into the remaining days of fair weather, put a fuller, we already learned. Vehemence, yes, H, not sound.
Vehemence.
Vehemence, 热烈。Vehemence, It was as though nature consciously sought to put a fuller vehement into the remaining days of fair weather. He looked down upon the plain aquiver with the sun stretching vastly before him. A plain, a quiver. What's a quiver? Quiver. 微颤抖 a quiver with the sun. Oh, plain. 是草原吗？ No. He looked down upon the plain a quiver with the sun stretching vastly before him. Okay. In the distance were the roof of Mahim. The roof of Mahim, and ever so far away the dimness of Worms. Here and there a more piercing glitter was the rain. Let's see what the I think it's a river. 莱茵河 yes, 莱茵河 rain. So that's why it's glitter. Here and there a more piercing glitter. Here and there a more piercing glitter was the rain. The tremendous spaciousness of it was glowing with rich gold. Tremendous spacious 宽广的 space 空灵 what spaciousness 空灵宽广你看我们家孩子还是不行啊 spaciousness of it rich gold Philip as he stood there his heart beating with sheer joy thought how the temple had stood with Jesus mountain and showed him the kingdom of the earth. Temple had stood with Jesus. To Philip, intoxicated. In Philip, intoxicated with the beauty of the scene. It seemed that it was the whole world which was spread before him, eager to step down and enjoy it. He was free from degrading. He was free from degrading fears and free from prejudice. He could go his way without the intolerable he feared. Yes, why people believe in God and get afraid? Suddenly, he realized that he had lost also that burden. Suddenly, he realized that he had lost also that burden of responsibility which made every action of his life a matter of urgent consequence. He could breathe more freely in a lighter air. He was responsible only to himself for the things he did. Freedom. Oh my God. He was his own master at last. From old habit, unconsciously he thanked God that he no longer believed in him. Great. Drunk with pride, drunk with pride in his intelligence and in his fearlessness. Drunk with pride in his intelligence and drunk with pride in his intelligence, not fearlessness. It just doesn't exist at all. Philip entered deliberately upon a new life. Right. Now free from one human bondage. Philip entered deliberately upon a new life. But his loss of faith made less difference in his behavior, of course, than he expected. Yes, of course. But his loss of faith made less difference in his behavior than he expected. Though he had thrown on one side the Christian dogmas, it never occurred to him to criticize the Christian ethics. He accepted the Christian virtue, its human virtue, and indeed, though it fine to practice them for their own sake, without a thought of reward or punishment, of course. There was small occasion for heroism. Heroism. Let's see. Heroism. Heroism. Hero. Here. Hero.
Heroism.
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 Heroism. Where? Here. There was small occasion for heroism in from Professor's house, but he was a little more exactly truthful than he had been, and he forced himself to be more than commonly attentive to the dull elderly ladies who sometimes engaged him in conversation. The gentle oath, the violent adjective, the gentle oath, the violent adjective, which are language and which he had cultivated before as a sign of manliness, he now elaborately eschewed.
Eschew.
Eschew. Great. That's for today. I have to give my dog a pill. Yes, that's all for today. I'm so happy.